I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today we're doing 20 games you should late pledge. Should is a very relative term. What I really mean is 20 games that are available to late back, to late pledge, that I really liked very much and therefore think that they're good games, that if you're looking for more games to late back because of the fact that crowdfunding is in a bit of a hiatus and your wallet is itching to spend money, well then these are those games. A recommendation, by the way, don't spend money you don't need to, only back responsibly and all those fun things, but this video is inspired by the fact that recently I did a video 10 fantastic games you should totally back, which was again 10 games I really personally enjoyed that I thought you should totally back, and I got a few comments saying, what about Castles of Burgundy? Wasn't that your number 2 game of all time last year? Well, yes, it was, but I also hadn't realized that the late pledges opened up, and so I didn't really talk about it, and instead decided to do a full video on this 20 games that you should or could late back if you're looking for conversations around those. But before we dive into those, and speaking of Castles of Burgundy, let's go ahead and talk about WSBG, the World Series of Board Gaming, which is our sponsor for today's video. The World Series of Board Gaming, I'll have a link to it down below. Make sure to use my link so they know I sent you. Also, make sure to use my promo code so you get $40 off when you go ahead and buy tickets to the World Series of Board Gaming. Specifically, these two options over here will give you $40 off, and yes, that $999 option does include 4 nights as well, so you're getting a stay as well as the World Series of Board Gaming. The World Series of Board Gaming happened this past year, and it's going to be an ongoing recurring event where you can go ahead and compete in 16 games to go ahead and win prizes. You can go ahead and compete in 16 games, winner winning $25,000 with additional prizes for second, third, and fourth place as well, and you're going to be competing with 16 different games. If you go to the tournament schedule over here, you can see the 16 games, maybe, I don't know where it is. Somewhere on this page, you actually have the list of games that are there, including the Castles of Burgundy, which entered this next year. It's going to be in there. I intended it this past year. I loved it. I had a lot of fun, and also it was very friendly. I know one thing people were concerned about is that it wouldn't be it would be too competitive and ruin board gaming, and overall the event was very friendly. It had access to the Dice Tower West library, so you can stay and play as much as you want. You could lose the first event and spend the rest of the day playing all under the same ticket while continuing to go into the events the next day. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. It was a very, very solid atmosphere and one of my favorite conventions. Not one to go to if you're looking for like a million vendors and booths like Gen Con, but if you're looking for a fun time with a different aspect of competition, as well as having access to a library, side room events, all of that, I highly recommend the World Series of Board Gaming. Yes, I do get credit if you go ahead and buy using my code, so factor in that bias, but that's the conversation. Speaking of bias, before we dive into the rest of this list, understand that I do work for Gamefound, and I'm going to tell you that because the very nature of this being a late pledge video means that like half of these games, or more than half, like 12 or 13 of these 20 games are on Gamefound. Some of them were Gamefound campaigns, and many of them, most of them, are games that are available to late pledge over on Gamefound. Understand and take into account that bias before I show you a whole bunch of games for this stuff over here. Yeah, let's go ahead and dive into it. In any case, starting off with number 1, which is the Castles of Burgundy. I think the Castles of Burgundy is fantastic. I haven't even touched this prototype. Another aspect for this list is every single game on this list is a game that I have played, and so in this one I haven't played the new prototype version of the Castles of Burgundy, but I have played the Castles of Burgundy. I love this game. I think this game is fantastic. I've reviewed this game. I've covered this game. I will cover this prototype at some point, maybe even before you see this video. I don't actually know yet. We'll see, but at some point I'll be covering this prototype. But the Castles of Burgundy is one of the highest rated games on Board Game Geek. It was my second highest game of all time last year, although, just full disclaimer, it's dropped a few places this year. We'll talk about it more when we get there. Still very high in my top 100, but it's definitely dropped a few places. But the Castles of Burgundy is a fantastic game that I have always enjoyed. It's my favorite Stefan Feld game, and I've had this game. This is one of the 2 longest lasting games in my collection. This and Seven Wonders are the games that have stuck around since my very first purchase of board games 12 years ago, and that's because it's that good. Most games go away, most games eventually leave, but some games stick around, and these games have really stuck around. I love the Castles of Burgundy. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think it's a game that holds up. It gives you strategic thinking, it gives you strategic depth, it gives you a ton of ways to score points, and Awakened Realms and Gamefound, I guess. Awakened Realms relaunched the game, relaunched it, partners with Ravensburg or whatnot, to relaunch this version of the game, and yes, you can go ahead and late back it. This is over the top. You do not need this. You do not need this at all to enjoy the Castles of Burgundy. The Castles of Burgundy is my favorite game well before I haven't actually played with this version yet. So the Castles of Burgundy is one of my favorite games without having even touched this version of it, and this version of it will cost you a pretty penny, but there are tons of options to get anything from who knows what. Even like the 3D terrain pack chock full of miniatures to make your entire Castles of Burgundy game a just over-the-top miniatures production. Is that worth it? Is it something you should do, shouldn't do? All of that, that's your decision. It's going to make it over the top. It might even take away from the accessibility, but it also might be super cool, and so I'll let you decide on that one. But this is the Castles of Burgundy, the game that inspired this entire video. From there, we're going to go ahead and move to Tidal Blades 2, The Rise of the Enfolders. Tidal Blades 2, Rise of the Enfolders. I have not played Tidal Blades 1, which is good because you don't need to get your hands on Tidal Blades 2. They are different games in the same universe, which is why the whole Tidal Blades, I mean, it's actually not called Tidal Blades 2, to be fair. It's Tidal Blades Rise of the Enfolders. The 2 would be confusing. Rise of the Enfolders is only a little confusing instead. But this is a dungeon crawling game. A dungeon crawling game that's going to have you wandering across this page book that you're going to be flipping through as you go through it, and trying to take your adventure while you manage your own cards in this little tableau over here. You're placing cards down and trying to activate rows and columns as they fill up, discarding those rows as necessary. So you're building out your tableau. You're going to be improving your character over the campaign as you go through game after game after game, trying to improve your stats as you go through the story-driven adventure. The story is going to be present, but it's going to be far more about the mechanics of the game. Very solid game. I really enjoyed this one from James Hudson from Skybat, from Jude City Games. I really enjoyed Tidal Blades Rise of the Enfolders, and I'm looking forward to well, playing it when I get my final copy. So that's Tidal Blades Rise of the Enfolders. Then we have Wild Assent Lavon Rising from Lazy Squire Games. I loved Wild Assent, and Wild Assent Lavon Rising gave me the same experience, but with more of a choose your own adventure, of an interactive story path where the actual encounters you're having are based on choices you make as you go through it, and made it the entire Wild Assent experience feel more interactive. And it replaced the typical camp phase that Wild Assent had with a upgrading phase that happened throughout the process of the choose your own adventure. It almost felt a bit more akin to playing through Oathsworn as opposed to playing through Wild Assent. It had the same Wild Assent core structure, but with the story more interwoven with the journey. And very choose your own adventure, to the point that this is one of those few times where I actually went through, after playing through the prototype that we had, I even went through the branching story paths as well to try to figure out what else happened depending on which way you went, which is something I usually try not to do, but I was compelled enough by the story. It felt up close and personal, to not feel like a giant world building situation. It felt up close, dirty, and personal as far as the stakes of what's going on. I really enjoyed Wild Ascent. I enjoyed Lavon Rising even more than Wild Ascent, and it is still available to pledge over on Gamefound. Then we have Rolling Heights from Alderac Entertainment Group. Rolling Heights, to me, is the game that's going to replace, not actually necessarily replace, but replace Quacks of Quedlinburg and Cubitos. Quacks of Quedlinburg and Cubitos both have a push your luck mechanism, as you either roll your dice or pull tokens from a bag, trying to constantly cycle them to get the better results possible, while also having a high degree of variability in what each of those things mean. Rolling Heights manages to replace that game in a way that weirdly takes away the variability. They don't have the same variability as those two games have, but it very much has the push your luck mechanism and just workers as you're trying to build a stronger and better city. I adored Rolling Heights, and for me it really, really worked very well as far as the mesh of just, it's from John D. Clear, and it was just really, really well designed as far as giving you the appeal of Quacks of Quedlinburg, the appeal of Cubitos, but in a system that somehow managed to have more appeal with lower variability. So there is that caveat. I am hoping for expansions for this one, as something that makes the meeples mean different things, so you can mix and match in a way that actually adds more to it. But I just thought Rolling Heights was a solidly compelling game as you rolled dice, rolled meeples in a box, and effectively built up your city as you went through the game. I really strongly enjoyed this one from Alderac Entertainment Group. Well, all of these I strongly enjoy. That's the nature of this video. We have Kingdom Rush Elemental Uprising from Lucky Duck Games. Kingdom Rush Elemental Uprising, and these, by the way, everything over here, I did check through everything. Everything does have a late pledge option over here, with one caveat that one of these games had like select late pledge options. We'll get to that. There are a whole bunch of other campaigns that unfortunately had credits for backers only or things like that were not available, because otherwise you'd be hearing a bunch of games that I really love that are, well, loved more than some of these. But either way, Kingdom Rush Elemental Uprising from Lucky Duck Games. This is a tower defense game, a cooperative tower defense game, as you have hordes of polyomino tiles kind of wandering, or hordes of tiles wandering towards your bases, and you're going to be placing polyominoes from the towers onto those tiles, trying to match them up in a way to most efficiently take down the invaders, because you have to stay on top of your game. Invaders are marching your way every single round, and you have to stay on top of it or you will start losing. Elemental Uprising they had the original Kingdom Rush, and then they had Elemental Uprising. Both are fantastic. You can go ahead and get both of this in this campaign, and it does give you like a large box or whatever it is, so you can get the whole storage unit and everything. I thought Kingdom Rush it might be my favorite Lucky Duck game. I'd have to check through my Lucky Duck games, but this one might be my favorite game from Lucky Duck Games. I really enjoyed this. I like polyominoes, I like tower defense, and this one just merged the two very well with a high degree of variability to the experience. I really enjoyed Kingdom Rush Elemental Uprising. Again, I'm saying that again, even though you know that. Earth Under Siege Flashpoint. by Dark Horizon Games. This is another one that I really enjoyed, and this is another solid game, a stealth-based dungeon crawling game. It's going to have a degree of stealth, it's going to have a degree of dungeon crawling. As you wander around the maps, there's no pictures here, I can't show you the pictures. As you wander, can I show you that picture? There we go, this is the closest we got over here. But you're going to be wandering through these maps that you're going to have, these various situations and scenarios and encounters, and you're trying to accomplish your goals, but you have to be mindful of the stealth-based aspects of the game. If you go through the game a little bit too much guns blazing, you may find yourself just dying rapidly to the various hordes of enemies that are going to start spawning. But if you take your time and if you eventually make your way to your objective, slowly killing enemies bit by bit and making sure to be mindful of your engagement as you go through it, and then only at the end or only when you absolutely need to do you start triggering those alarms and blasting your guns and all that stuff, you will find your way making your route just fine. If you've played games like V Commandos, this has a very similar pacing to it. I overall very much enjoyed, I very much enjoyed playing through this one. It's one that I am curious how the final game will play out. I know the rules were not the easiest rules for me and it wasn't as easy to jump into. There were a lot of kind of edge cases and things going on in the rules that I didn't love, but the overall experience I thought was excellent, and I'm very much hoping for the final game to be as accessible as possible. Then we have Last Light from Roy Kanaday. Last Light from Roy Kanaday, this one is fantastic. If you like 4X and if you want a 4X game that you can play in an hour, this absolutely delivers on that experience. This game is a 4X game that the first time I played it was online. I played it on TTS with 4 people, with three of whom who had never played the game before, and even with all of those caveats, the game took, I believe, I think it was under an hour. It might have been a drop over, even with online and new players. This is one that I have a 2-player gameplay with Roy Kanaday. You can check that out. Again, very short, very accessible. I think it was like 33 minutes or 36 minutes for a 2-player 4X game that really captures the feel of 4X. That's the big thing about Last Light. There's always going to be compromise when you take a 4X game and say, hey, it plays in an hour, but this one does play in an hour with some degree of compromise around just how much depth there is to certain aspects, but it did have 4X. I've played other 4X games before, other 4X games that promised you a shorter experience, and I found that they did not give you the same balance of feeling like a 4X game while playing in a short time. There's almost always compromises made where it either takes 2 to 3 hours, and that's what short is, or it doesn't feel like a 4X game at all. This one really gave you the best of both worlds. Last Light is easily going to be the most played 4X game in my collection, and it plays well even at higher player counts. Even if you go to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it plays well at those player counts as well. Caveat, that's based on other people telling you it plays well, not just the designer. I have not played it more than 4, unfortunately, so I can't comment on that directly. But yeah, this is a really solid game. I really enjoyed this one. I don't know what retail distribution is going to be like for Last Light, but if they have good retail distribution, I can see this one going very high in the Board Game Geek rankings because it's just a good game. Then we have Legend Academy from Illiterati Games. I adored this game. I very much adored this game. I only got to play one scenario, so take that into account. I did get to play multiple characters, but only one scenario, but I really, really enjoyed. Here we go. An absolute ton of fun. It's exactly what I like in games. What I mean by that is the game had just fun things that I enjoyed. It had deck building, it had tableau building, it had upgrading your character, it let you feel powerful every single time you played. There's a bit of a pathway as to how you upgrade your character, upgrading your deck basically, and you have to try to follow that pathway, trying to figure out the best combinations of stuff you can do to break the game as much as possible. This game just made you feel powerful in all the right combinations based on every encounter having different bonuses you can go for with the combination of your character and with the escalating scenario goals. It just felt fun. The entire thing just felt fun. It gave me stuff that I enjoyed doing. It gave me deck building, it gave me character upgrading, and it gave me the ability to feel like I could do cool stuff as I charged through the game, accomplishing my goals and trying to score as many points as possible. And again, that's what the only getting a small taste of what the full game will have to offer. I really enjoyed this one. Again, I'm sorry for saying that. I really apologize for saying that, but I just keep repeating it instinctively. I have Age of Atlantis from Academy Games, I have Age of Atlantis from Eldorado Games as well, sitting on my floor over there. I do need to play that one, but for right now, we have Legend Academy, really solid one. I highly recommend. We have Primal the Awakening. This one seems to be like you can still back it. This is one of those things, again, if you click on this over here, you have the pre-order button. This is all from an incognito tab, meaning it's not me with back or credits or anything. It looks like you can still back Primal the Awakening, and if you can, if they'll let you, I recommend doing so. I thought Primal the Awakening was fantastic. I thought the game was incredible in terms of the tactical strategy it gave you, the boss fighting elements that are in play, as you try to figure out how to utilize your cards, your hand of cards, and which cards are going to be discarded to pay for the other cards. Very similar to what you encounter in Marvel Champions. You have some cards paying for other cards, and you're constantly trying to choose which selection of your hand, which combination of things will get you towards your goals. Meanwhile, you're fighting against these beasts that have different trigger points, different ways to encounter and deal with them, different playstyles. Each monster has a different playstyle, and you're going through a 10 to 15 game campaign as you try to figure out how to level up, how to gather gear, how to take those bones and teeth and everything from your enemies and use them to craft new weapons based on the forge you're at. So there's a degree of escalation, of character growth, of upgrading as you build out your character, and you could play it one shot as well. They have setups for one shot in case you want to dive into it with like, I just want to do this or that or whatever. They have those as options as well. Primal the Awakening is it's expensive. It's not cheap. Nothing here is cheap, just to be very clear. Well, some games in today's video are cheap. This is definitely not one of those games, but it is a very, very solid one. Then we have Unsettled from Orange Nebula. This is the second campaign that they had. You can go ahead and late pledge whatever you want over here, but this is the second campaign, bringing Unsettled back to Kickstarter, now able to late pledge on Gamefound, and this is one where you can go ahead and get a solo or cooperative space exploration game. This is a fantastic game. This is one that really made me feel, how to put this, it gave me the puzzly aspects of Vindication. I love Vindication. Vindication has been in my top 10 or just outside or just inside my top 10 for a while, and it's one that I love the puzzle of trying to feel out how you combine different things to get the end game that you want, to get your pathway towards victory. And I found that Unsettled gave me the same thing, but in a cooperative engine. Each planet gives you a totally unique puzzle and a totally different way to approach the game, with just different things going on that planet, giving you high degrees of replayability on the planet, because every planet first of all has like 3 scenarios in it, but additionally you'll have more scenarios that are unlocked, like doing this Kickstarter, doing this crowdfunding, they went ahead and added more scenarios for existing planets, but then also that they're still replayable because of the combinations of things you can mix in and match. For me, like some of the planets that I haven't played in like a year now or whatnot, I can dive into those and they'll still feel like a fresh experience. It has replayability as long as you don't play the same thing right away the next day, and it has that puzzle solving aspect as you try to figure out how to manage your resources to survive on different desert planets that are trying to destroy you and sabotage you in totally unique and different ways. I thought this was very well done. I didn't know what to expect when I first backed it, but when I finally dove into it, it just gave me that rewarding puzzle feeling that I very much enjoy and appreciate in games, and very much enjoyed and appreciated in Unsettled. Then we have the Great Wall reprint from Awakened Realms. We'll have a few Awakened Realms campaigns today. We have the Castles of Burgundy already, we have the Great Wall reprint, and I think we have 2 more. Again, I work for Gamefound, take that into account, but also I reviewed and covered all these 4 games well before I ever did, so any bias I had was present well before. But the Great Wall reprint from Awakened Realms, this is, I want to say this is my favorite Awakened Realms game title. Probably. I'd have to think through it, but I think, well, unless you count Castles of Burgundy, then Castles of Burgundy wins. But the Great Wall is a little messy, and I do recommend it most with the black powder. It's not the easiest game to pick up, it's not the easiest game to table, but wow is it fun to do so. You have this tower defense element sort of, but you're playing with other players, and you have to be mindful of the fact that not all the players at the table necessarily care about the same objectives. This is not semi-cooperative, to be very clear. It's not semi-co-op, it doesn't feel like semi-co-op, but there are this aspect of the invaders taking down the towers, and you'll lose shame and honor accordingly. So you're trying to figure out how to navigate your goals in the game while being mindful of your opponent's goals, but again, very much not semi-co-op. I've played semi-co-op, it does not work for me in general. Even Nemesis from Awakened Realms, I prefer the cooperative mode of it because there is a degree of semi-co-op in that game. This does not in any way feel like semi-co-op. There are times where you might want to abandon the wall, but that's because it works for your strategy. It's not because it's an aspect of, oh, we all have to work together, and if one person doesn't, whatever. Everyone's working towards their goals, and there are so many rewards in place for taking down the enemies that more often than not, you are taking down the enemies, trying to do so as efficiently as possible. Meanwhile, you're managing your generals and advisors, which is why I love this game. Those generals and advisors are the core aspect of the game for me, because the generals and advisors, what you have is you have a powerful general whose ability gets only more powerful as you use the advisors to tuck them underneath that general, but alternatively the advisors are powerful in their own right, and so you're constantly choosing as you grab advisors, what are you doing with this advisor? Is it going to be used for its own ability? Is it going to be used to be power up and augment your general? And the combination of the various abilities and powered up abilities you have along the way are going to define what your core advantages are as you play through this game. And you want to play to your core advantages, you want to play to your core strengths. It just gives you such a variable experience. Again, I highly recommend the Black Powder expansion. The other expansions I haven't really dove into at all, so I can't really heavily comment on them. I've read the rules for some of them, but haven't really played with them. But I strongly recommend this game, and I do always play it with the Black Powder expansion. I think the first 2 times I played it without the Black Powder, but since then it's always with the Black Powder. I think it just adds to the general feeling of things collapsing around you. Then we have Burncycle from Chip Theory Games. This is one that is, well, it's Burncycle. It's Burncycle. That's what it comes down to. This is Burncycle. This is one that gives you... Burncycle is one of Chip Theory's fantastic games. I love all their games, and currently my ranking of Chip Theory games will actually save my ranking for another time, but I like all their games, and Burncycle is one that I do prefer most solo, to be very clear. I found it to be most compelling solo, but I very much enjoyed it at 2 players. 3 is where I'm kind of like, I don't know if I'd play a 3-player again. But Burncycle is a game of stealth, navigational, well, stealth basically. You're trying to wander into various headquarters, trying to take down corporations, you're trying to manage this little side puzzles you hack into a corporation, and you're trying to manage the abilities of your bots as you wander down different hallways and headquarters, trying to figure out what it is you can do and how to accomplish your goals, and there's so many different puzzles of goals in play. Like many chip theory games, some of the problem of it does come to the fact that when you play a new scenario, there is this mental load of like, how do I actually have to play this entirely new scenario? You can't just walk straight into it. It's very nuanced as far as what you're trying to do, and it totally changes the way you approach the puzzle. This gives their games high replayability and high reward, but it does add a degree of complexity that makes them not necessarily as friendly to newcomers. In fact, if you're looking for a game that's friendly to newcomers, I recommend Hoplomachus from Chip Theory Games. I recommend Hoplomachus. Hoplomachus, I think, is their most accessible, Hoplomachus Victorum. I think it's their most accessible game so far, while still maintaining most of the depth and feel of their games. But Burncycle gives you such a rewarding aspect as you combine bots in different ways, as you use their powers, as you go from floor to floor. It can be long, especially at 3 floors. I find 2 floors is my favorite way to play. 1 floor feels like a slightly shorter experience, 2 floors feels like it's the full experience, and 3 floors feels like what you do when you want to sign up for a long Sunday afternoon all by your lonesome. Then we have Arydia, The Paths We Dare Tread from Far Off Games. Arydia, The Paths We Dare Tread is, well, this is from the creators of Xayah, Legends of a Drift System, and this is their follow-up game, Arydia. That was one that I took a look at it on Kickstarter, and I was like, this looks very cool, but also it's a game that I just think it's too much for what it's giving. It just doesn't seem like it's compelling enough versus the amount of stuff you have to learn. The fun part is they saw that video, they reached out and they said, hey, you want to play it on TTS? And I was like, sure, absolutely. And so I played it on TTS, and I said, can you send me the prototype to cover it? And they sent me the prototype to cover it, and I played through it again. So I played it the full TTS playthrough, as well as playing through it again a second time over here in person with the physical components. And my biggest complaint is that it does have that campaign aspect where it might be hard to consistently table and jump back in and remember everything and all that stuff. But if you do have a campaign setup, if you are the kind of person who will finish and play through campaign games, then Arydia was an excellent campaign game. It gave you high degrees of, first of all, it gave you RPG elements in a way that is RPG accessible even for someone who's more of a board gamer focused person like myself. I didn't mind being the gruff guard, being like, oh yes, yeah, they wandered down the left corner and they went down. I didn't mind playing into my characters because the game gives you this like role-playing point to play into your characters, which can be used to mitigate a die roll. And so it gives people just enough comfort and friendliness to role-play to the characters to a degree, while also having high RPG elements of leveling up and growing your character, while having a large degree of choose-your-own-adventure in the actual different levels of the pathway of where you go in this world, of once you get there, who you talk to, in what order, and the things you do, and then finally giving you as a decent and a decent and rewarding combat system as well, as far as how you utilize your weapons and your abilities to smash through the enemies and hit their pain points and cascade critical blows. The whole thing worked very well and was indeed very rewarding. And that's Arydia, The Paths We Dare Tread. Then we have Tiny Epic Vikings from Gameland Games, the only Tiny Epic Vikings game that I've actually played that I want to own, which might sound worse than I intended to be. What I mean to say is I've played maybe 5 or 6 Tiny Epic games so far, and every single one that I've played I have enjoyed, and they've been decent to a degree, and some of them held on to longer than others. Tiny Epic Defenders is actually one I held on to the longest, but ultimately I have found that Tiny Epic games are very good at being tiny, and they seem to be a little less amazing at being epic, at least myself. I think they're a great product and a great compromise for those who are trying to manage price point and shelf space and get a good game. I think they very much deliver on those categories. For me, I often am not trying as hard to manage price point and shelf space. I'm more focused on the great game, and so I often found their games compromised a little bit on being a great game, at least for myself. Not Tiny Epic Vikings. Tiny Epic Vikings, granted, with only a play under my belt, so factor that in, only a single play. Did a first impressions video, not a full review, because of the fact that I only had a chance to play this one once. But this one I really thought was excellent. I thought it was very well done as far as giving you a drafting, area control, Blood Rage-esque feel, but not really Blood Rage. Do not walk into it expecting Blood Rage. That would likely be a disappointment. But I thought it very much delivered on just giving me a solid experience that I just thought was rewarding. Solid and rewarding. It was my favorite Tiny Epic games to date, not even a question. I make no guarantees that it'll stay in my collection long term, but I think it will stay in my collection for a decent amount of time, because it does take up very little safe space on the shelf, it is fairly cheap, and it was very good. Then we have ThreeTale. ThreeTale from Borderia. ThreeTale is a cooperative adventure game, playable for 1 or 3 players specifically, I believe. I think that's the way they structure this. It's for 3 players specifically. I've played it at 1, 2, and 3. I think 2 is a bit of a compromise because you always have 3 characters in the game. Managing all 3 yourself was very doable. Managing 1 each with 3 players, very doable. Managing 2 for 1 player, 1 for another is doable, but does feel a bit weird. So it is that weird caveat there. But past that little exception, ThreeTale starts off with almost Carcassonne style, building out your tiles, building out your map. But everything you do as you place down tiles involves building up and improving your stats. You have these little boards over here. You're trying to just constantly build up and improve your stats in this game, which is very rewarding. It's very great. You're building up these stats. You're improving yourself. You're getting better as you play through it. And you're doing all of that so you can prep for the end game. Because then eventually, at one point, you eventually do hit that end game. And when you do hit that end game, then it comes down to trying to figure out, okay, great, have I leveled up my stats enough in the right way for the right effect? Am I going to be strong enough to take down this end game? Because the end game is the part where the challenge comes into play. Along the way, you're kind of just focusing on trying to just be as good as you can, and that end game, which is variable, by the way, there's a variable end game going on here. To me, I call ThreeTale the stat building game, but I like building stats, and I enjoy that process. That wasn't meant to make fun of the game. That was meant to be, I like this game. It is a stat building game. It's all about upgrade this so you can upgrade that, and build your little tableau, and then also each character has their own special paths as well, and you're trying to fork your way down those, and the whole thing just felt like building up a nice trio of characters in order to tackle the end game apocalypse in a way that was short enough, accessible enough, and just overall rewarding enough while being abstract enough at the same time. Then we have Verdant from Flat Out Games. This is one that does have a few pledges locked out depending on what you're looking for. If you scroll down over here, you'll see you can't get all the things. You can't get that trilogy again, but Verdant's already delivering, so you have to factor that in. Some of these things over here just means you can't get this bundle, but you could get Cascadia and Verdant. You could get Verdant on its own. You just can't get your hands on Calico, apparently. So Calico is not available anymore, but that's okay. Calico is fantastic, but so is Cascadia and so is Verdant. For me, the order is Cascadia, then Calico, then Verdant, although we'll see. Time will tell as they continue to grow, but Verdant's fantastic. It's great. I just got my copy from this Kickstarter from when it launched, and I've already started playing through it both competitively as well as solo, diving into the game because it is a good game. I like that puzzly feeling, and all these three games give me that puzzly feeling. How do I try to combine things in different ways to optimize my score? And they're all very rewarding in what they do and how they do it. So yeah, I think Verdant's fantastic is what I'm saying, and I think I recommend it. And yeah, this is available over here. I think Cascadia is excellent too. It is my favorite of the genre. But yeah, that's that. I think I said but yeah like 4 times there. Then we have Illiterati Deluxe Edition over here. Illiterati from Gap Closer Games. Illiterati was a cooperative ward puzzle game. It's a cooperative ward puzzle game that also relies on a timer. So the combination of the timer as well as the cooperative aspect takes away some of the aspects that I don't like about ward games. I don't like the ward games can feel like it constantly comes down to who can add the S at the end of that ward to get the extra bonus 4 points. I don't like the fact that you can sit there and take forever to try to come up with a perfect ward. The timer in this game removes both. The timer removes the timing aspect. It's no longer about trying to spend infinite trying to come up with perfection. You have a limited amount of time to work on your ward. And the cooperative element means we're working as a team. I'm passing you letters. I'm doing what we need to do. We're figuring it out together. And it doesn't figure like somebody who just reads the longest books and knows the most dictionaries manages to win the game. I really enjoyed this one. It gives you a sense of tackling the villains. Ultimately, it comes down to trying to craft a ward. I think you still have to like the concept of ward games in order for you to like Illiterati. But if you like the concept of ward games and you want one that's done differently than many of the ones I have engaged with so far, well, Illiterati will provide that. We have Lords of Ragnarok, our third Awakened Realms title over here. Lords of Ragnarok from Awakened Realms, the spiritual successor to Lords of Hellas. This one recently opened up for late pledges as well. And this is one that I like Lords of Hellas a lot. When I first played Lords of Hellas, which took me long enough, mind you, but I did finally dive into it, and I thought the trio of different goals you could try to go for in the game as you try to figure out how to actually win as you play through Lords of Hellas was interesting. The fact that you could win different ways, conquering beasts, getting more control of the lands, getting the temples, the fact that you can do all that just gave it a rewarding puzzle. We kind of had to be mindful of what players would do at any given point while you puzzle through your own objectives, trying to make sure you're winning and they're not winning. Lords of Ragnarok took that same concept but made it more direct head-to-head. It felt a little bit looser in the quest sense and a little bit more direct, in-your-face confrontational. So it kind of combined elements of Lords of Hellas with a little bit of a closer, direct confrontational aspect of Blood Rage, while making changes to other aspects of the game at the same time. Overall, it delivered to me Lords of Hellas, but just felt more engaging. I already like Lords of Hellas, mind you. I just like Lords of Ragnarok more. They felt like the same core system, with Lords of Ragnarok being a drop more in-your-face and confrontational, which for me worked well. This is one that you can go ahead and back on Gamefound, because that's the whole, the video's backing in general, but on Gamefound, yeah. We have Resident Evil, the board game. From Steamforged Games. This is another one that I solidly enjoyed. Yes, Resident Evil the board game is one that it gives you a dungeon crawling element, and it's my favorite of the Resident Evil series so far. They had Resident Evil 2, then 3, then 1. That's the order they did these games in. But Resident Evil 3 was excellent. Resident Evil 1, which followed 3, is better. And the reason it was better, or at least the reason it was better to me, is because of the fact that the terrain around you, the board around you, unlocked as you went. You did not start off the scenario by just knowing what the entire board looked like. You had to wander down hallways, and you'd open up a tile, and you flip the card, and you say, okay, great, these are the enemies that pop up. This is the board that pops up. So it gave you the sense that Resident Evil 3 gave you, which I thought was excellent. It was a sense of survival, a sense of trying to figure out how to actually deal with these zombies that are a real threat. You can't just shoot everything in the head all the time. You can try, but sometimes it's about closing the door. Sometimes it's about running down the hallway. Sometimes it's about evading, knowing how to manipulate your characters, their abilities, the weapons you have and the weapons you don't have against the enemies in the scenario made Resident Evil feel like a strong survival game. And Resident Evil took all those elements of Resident Evil 3 and then said, hey, by the way, you also don't know what the whole area you're exploring looks like, and so there is that. And that combined with some really cool bosses and some other elements of the game just made Resident Evil, to me, a stronger version of Resident Evil 3. And then lastly, but not leastly, we have ISS Vanguard. Is leastly even an award? I feel like leastly should be a award, right? We have ISS Vanguard from Awakened Realms, the last Awakened Realms title, and the last game we have over here. ISS Vanguard, which has already started arriving in people's hand. They've opened up the campaign for the second wave or whatnot, so people can jump in on that. And this game is already getting incredibly rave reviews on Board Game Geek. This is one of those times where it's always interesting, because I remember when this game first came out, it got criticized. It got criticized because people were like, oh, it's ISS Vanguard, the work office manual, because they have this whole ship book and this ship phase, which takes the whole aspect of managing your crew in between. You have a landing on the planet kind of situation, and then you wrap that up with a full maintenance phase. And if I calling it a full maintenance phase is why the game was mocked to a degree when it was first shown, because people were like, it feels like work. It feels like work until you play it, which I played it, and it didn't feel like work. It felt like part of the game. It felt like that aspect when you're done with Mass Effect, you're done with exploration, you head back to your ship and you figure out all the ways to optimize and upgrade and deal with these threats on the ship. It felt like an entire sub-game. It didn't feel like maintenance. And the fact that it feels like a sub-game made it engaging. I like that ship phase. I like dealing with how to upgrade, what to investigate, where to put my research points, and how to generally improve my crew as we wander and float through space and try to navigate where we're going to next. It felt like part of the game. And that's all great, but I was sent a prototype, and so maybe I'm victim to bias, and maybe I just want Awakened Realms to like me and all those things, and so there's always that nervousness in my own head of how right am I about a game, and I like this game a lot. I really enjoyed it, and so it's nice to see the reviews pour in of people who are really enjoying it as well, of people who are going through this experience, having a blast with it, having a fun time, and just overall seeing all the things that the people who played the game during the campaign saw. That the people who played the game during the campaign got to try, got to see, got to dive into, and all those things they enjoyed, seeing others go into and enjoy it. And so don't take my word for it at all. Look at the Board Game Geek ratings for people who are loving this experience, loving this game, and are excited to be a part of this universe. And that is basically what we have as far as the 20 campaign games, not 20 campaign games, 20 campaigns of games that you can late pledge. As I said at the beginning, back responsibly, pledge responsibly. This is instead of our 2 back or not to back video today because crowdfunding is temporarily going through that up and down and we have something instead of it. But enjoy, back responsibly, back accordingly, make good choices. This is not meant to be a FOMO-based video. These are a lot of good games, but if you have plenty of good games you're not playing, why spend money on more good games that you're not playing? That's not necessary. It's not helpful. I mean, it's helpful to the creators of the game. It's less helpful to yourself, and I do think you should prioritize yourself. There will always be good games. There will always be good games available to back, to pledge, to get your hands on. This is if you're looking for some guidance as to which ones I think are good, or which ones other people think are good sometimes, depending on the game. So I'm definitely hoping to give some degree of guidance, but also not to tempt you into these. There are plenty of good games, and I bet you have a whole bunch on your shelf that you either played and you're not playing enough of, or that you haven't dived into either. So just back responsibly is what I'm saying. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.